Families love to preach about loyalty, how blood is thicker than water, to put family first. But what happens when your family treats you like dirt, but worships the ground your bank account stands on? I found out the hard way that my parents were managers of appearances. Harold measured worth in suits and promotions. Denise kept a social life while starving our home of affection. Love, support, respect, those were foreign languages. The only person who ever saw me was my grandmother, Rose. She wore kindness like armor, slipped me secret money for college, and taught me to keep my head when others tore you down. When she died, my parents acted like vultures. They planned vacations and new cars between floral arrangements. They expected her millions to be handed to them. But when the will was read, every cent went to me. Their polite smiles hardened into something poisonous and cruel. They didn't just disown me, they sued me. They sued me, dragged my name through mud. They forgot one thing. They taught me how to be ruthless. I wasn't going to let them win. I grew up as the invisible child in my own house. My father, Harold, was a corporate man. Sharp suits, sharper tongue. He measured worth in paychecks and promotions. My mother, Denise, played the role of a perfect suburban wife. But behind closed doors, she was cold, manipulative, and obsessed with keeping up appearances. They had 2 kids, me, and my younger brother, Jason. Jason was the golden boy. Football captain, charismatic, spoiled rotten. He could crash a car at 16, and Dad would buy him a new one the next week. I got straight as scholarships, worked after school to help Grandma with bills, and still, I was the disappointment. The only person who really saw me, was Grandma Rose. She was my dad's mother, and to say they had a complicated relationship would be an understatement. My dad saw her as old-fashioned and embarrassing. But to me, she was everything. She cooked with me, taught me patience, reminded me that kindness was a form of strength. When my parents criticized me, she defended me. She even helped me afford college, slipping me quiet checks while whispering, "Don't you dare tell your father." My parents hated that. Hated how close we were. Hated that her affection and her wealth wasn't pointed at them. See, Grandma wasn't just warm and loving. She was wealthy. Quietly, secretly wealthy. She'd invested smartly, owned properties, and had tucked away millions. My parents always assumed the money would one day be theirs. They treated Grandma's fortune like a future payday. I'd overhear late-night conversations, my mother saying things like, "Once Rose is gone, we'll finally be free. Harold will never have to worry again." But they didn't know the truth. Grandma had already told me, "Sweetheart, my will is set. I know who deserves it, you. They've had their chance at my love. They wasted it." I didn't believe her at first. Millions for me. It sounded impossible. But when Grandma's health declined, and my parents suddenly started visiting her more often, bringing flowers, putting on fake smiles, hinting about family legacy, I realized just how much they were counting on it. The night before she passed, I sat with her, holding her frail hand. She whispered, "They'll show you who they really are once I'm gone. Don't let them break you. And don't you dare give them a dime." I promised her I wouldn't at the funeral. My parents put on their best grieving act, but I noticed how their eyes kept darting to the lawyer. The will was all they cared about. Sometimes I walked through our house like a ghost, watching laughter spill from the living room while my name dissolved into the walls. Conversations were performances, praise for Jason, polite nods for me. If I mentioned a scholarship, Dad would smile and pivot to Jason's sports stats, as if my future were background music. Denise collected guests and gossip, but not my troubles. Birthday cakes arrived late or thin. Rewards were reserved for the golden son. The photographs on the mantle were Jason front and center, my face cropped to the edge. I learned to measure belonging by empty chairs and silence compliments. Grandma Rose was my rebellion. In her kitchen, I was allowed to be loud and messy and real. She'd set me on the counter, show me how to fold dough, and warn me about people who counted love in currency. Keep your eyes open, she'd whisper, tapping my wrist like a promise. With her, I learned the lawyer's words echoed in the quiet room. To my beloved grandson, I leave my estate, my accounts, my properties, and every asset I own. He has been my joy, my companion, and my true family. There was no mention of my father. None for my mother. None for Jason. Just me. I swear I could feel the air turn electric. My parents' faces drained of color. My mother blinked like she was trying to wake from a bad dream. My father's jaw tightened so hard I thought his teeth might crack. Jason laughed out loud, like it had to be a joke. Wait, you're saying she gave it all to him? To him? That's insane. But the lawyer was firm. The documents were airtight. I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would accept it. That they'd grit their teeth and move on. I was wrong. That night, my mother stormed into my apartment. She didn't knock. She didn't cry. She just stood there, shaking, eyes wild. You owe us, she hissed. That money is ours. She stole it from us and gave it to you, but we won't let this stand. My father was behind her, silent but seething. Jason just smirked. Don't get too comfortable, bro. You'll screw this up. And when you do, we'll be there to take it. They weren't bluffing. A week later, I got the papers. They were suing me, claiming undue influence, saying I manipulated Grandma, that I tricked her while she was weak. They wanted the will overturned. It was pure insanity. I had loved that woman, cared for her when they didn't even bother visiting. And now they were dragging her memory through the mud to line their pockets. I cried that night. Ugly shaking sobs. Not just because of the betrayal, but because deep down, Grandma had been right. They were showing me exactly who they were. They turned our private grief into public spectacle. Tabloid-hungry relatives began whispering in church basements and over neighborly fences. My phone filled with messages, some sympathetic, most poisoned. Did you really take advantage of her? One text read, as if the love I carried could be reduced to a rumor. Another caller, posing as a concerned former friend, asked leading questions that would later be parroted in deposition rooms. Denise sat on my couch like a viper in pearls, unfolding a neat stack of photographs she'd brought from home. Pictures staged and cropped to suggest intimacy that could be twisted into influence. Harold never raised his voice. He simply watched, as if my humiliation were a ledger he was balancing. Their strategy was surgical. Drown me in paperwork, smear my name, and make it unbearable for anyone to imagine me holding my grandmother's savings. Neighbors began to look at me differently. People who once waved from porches crossed the street to avoid me. My manager asked to have a word about the office image. The university where I worked part-time sent a gentle inquiry about my personal affairs. I was becoming an embarrassing headline in my own life. Legal motions multiplied. Allegations of secret coaching, isolation, financial manipulation, words designed to sound plausible to those who didn't know the truth. I produced letters my grandmother had written me in a looping, steady hand. I showed the small banknotes she had slipped into my palm at birthdays. Still, their lawyers dug for inconsistencies, calling witnesses who remembered only what Denise had rehearsed them to say. At night, I told myself I would let the law decide. But that moral high ground was eaten away by a cold, growing panic. The trial wasn't just about money, it was about my identity. They wanted to rewrite my childhood, to paint every act of care as calculated. They wanted to erase any memory of being there for Grandma, unless it could be Monetized, Dad. So in that courtroom, under fluorescent lights and beneath the bored hum of the press, When my parents stood and lied for the camera, something in me snapped not only from rage, but from a sharp, resourceful clarity. If they were going to weaponize family and law, then I would weaponize their own truth. I would not flail. I would plan. I would wait patient and cold until their hands reached into the fire they had started. Revenge is best served cold, but mine would be frozen, sharpened, and aimed straight at the heart. First, I lawyered up. Not just any lawyer, I hired a brutal estate litigator. Grandma left enough funds to build a wall of iron around her will. Lawsuits weren't enough. They wanted war. I prepared step 1, exposure. My parents built their lives on reputation. Dad in corporate halls, mom in social clubs. Jason on his athlete persona. So I dug. Grandma left me records, receipts, letters, notes. My dad had borrowed money and never repaid. My mother pushed Grandma to sell and gift them cash. Jason once stole from her purse. I leaked pieces to the right people. Dad's company heard about irregular withdrawals. Mom's club murmured about scheming. Jason's coaches heard whispers. Their world shrank to legal briefs. Step 2, courtroom chess. Every motion they filed was met with evidence. Accusations collapsed under facts. Nurses, neighbors, even Grandma's pastor confirmed I'd been her companion. Depositions meant to humiliate exposed their lies. Deleted messages resurfaced. A ledger hidden in a cookbook documented loans Dad had promised to repay and never did. The judge started asking hard questions. Step 3, the twist. While they sank in legal fees, I quietly bought the mortgage on their house. One of Grandma's properties was tied to the bank holding my parents' loan. I used their inheritance as the instrument of their downfall. Shell transfers, quiet meetings with bankers, favors called in. The foreclosure notice arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Denise held it like it burned. They begged and threatened. My mother's tears were thin. My father sent a note smelling of aftershave and regret. Jason pleaded from a blocked number. I ignored them. Step 4, the silent hammer I struck surgically. A press tip about Dad's withdrawals. Copies of correspondence to Mom's friends revealing her long-term schemes. A discreet inquiry to Jason's program about missing scholarship paperwork. Each move was legal and quietly devastating. Then I escalated. I pushed for punitive damages after evidence showed clear patterns of manipulation and isolation. The judge, tired of posturing, allowed harsher remedies. Their legal bills snowballed. Letters came from cousins admitting coercion. Nurses offered affidavits. The narrative shifted. I was caretaker, not thief. Through it, I kept my face calm. I went to work, cooked the recipes Grandma taught me, and kept a quiet life. My normalcy made their unraveling seem even more savage. I took nothing that wasn't mine, but I used everything they valued: greed, reputation to topple them. The months that followed felt like controlled demolition. Every hearing pushed them closer to the edge. Their friends, who once toasted their names, began to whisper questions I had planted. A former business partner of my father called to say he had heard rumors of missing invoices. A woman from my mother's club confessed she'd been offered favors for silence. I learned to be surgical with emotion. Revenge was not only legal strategy, it was theater for the conscience. I wrote to one of Grandma's oldest neighbors, asking about kindnesses Grandma had shown me. The neighbor's affidavit became another nail in the coffin of my parents' claims. I let the community see the contrast. A granddaughter who cooked, cleaned, and kept vigil, versus a family that arrived with flowers and left with entitlement. There were nights I nearly cracked. I dreamed of my grandmother, of her knitting needles clacking like a metronome. I kept thinking of her voice, small, fierce, private, and the promise I had made. That promise hardened into a map. Every reveal, every counter, every expose followed it. When the final motions were decided, the judge described a pattern of coercion and opportunism he found disturbing. The will stood. The punitive damages were substantial. The legal cost was ruinous for them. Watching them shrink under consequence was not a triumph, but proof. The truth, when wielded properly, can be as devastating as any lie. In the end, I did not break them with a scream. I broke them with patience, with paper, and with people who finally chose truth over fear. It was a revenge that tasted like cold tea, bitter, necessary, and inevitable. The day the final ruling came down, I swear I felt Grandma in the room with me. The judge barely looked up from his papers as he spoke. His voice calm, almost indifferent, like this was just another case. Just another family torn apart by greed. The will stands as written. Full inheritance to the grandson. Case dismissed. That was it. No fanfare, no fireworks. Just a few words that carved my parents' future in stone. I glanced across the courtroom. My father's skin was pale, his jaw slack like he'd just been told his own death sentence. My mother stared blankly at the judge, her mascara smeared, lips moving soundlessly as though she could rewrite reality if she just wished hard enough. Jason, he let out a bitter laugh and muttered, "This is **key," loud enough for the bailiff to shoot him a warning glare, but the gavel dropped. It was over only at WSN single quotes 2 weeks later. The fallout hit. The bank repossessed their house. The movers came like vultures, boxing up decades of their lives while neighbors peeked from behind curtains, murmuring behind cupped hands. The family that once strutted through the neighborhood with smug smiles and expensive cars now stood on the lawn surrounded by cardboard boxes and pitying stares. And me? I didn't have to lift a single finger. Their reputations dissolved faster than their finances. My father, once respected in his company, was quietly pushed out after whispers of embezzling from his own mother spread. My mother's social circle vanished overnight. The women she once called friends now avoided her calls, calling her a schemer who destroyed her own family. Jason, he became nothing more than a punchline, the guy who robbed his grandmother. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the house. It was their pride, their carefully curated image, their status all reduced to ashdot and the sweetest part. Watching the moment, they realized there was no coming back from this. They had tried to take everything from me. They dragged me into court, spat on Grandma's memory, twisted love into greed. But in the end, their greed was the blade they fell on. They didn't just lose the case. They lost everything, just like Grandma said they would. Weeks later, I walked through Grandma's garden. The roses were blooming, soft and fragrant in the breeze. For the first time in my life, I felt peace. Not because I had millions in the bank or because I had won, but because I had kept my promise to her. I didn't let them break me. Do I feel guilt? Sometimes. They are still my family, by blood at least. But then I remember the courtroom, the lies, the betrayal. I remember the way my mother spat the word "oh" like an accusation. Family isn't about shared DNA. It's about love, loyalty, and respect. Grandma gave me that. My parents never did. In the end, they destroyed themselves. I did not stage their fall. I only refused to prop them up. All I had to do was step back and let the small fissures widen until they could no longer pretend. Their silence now is louder than any accusation they ever hurled at me. Sometimes I still dream of her laugh. People ask me about them. I smile and say, they sued me. They lost everything. I ask you again, what would you have done in my place?